and welcome to another episode of 8-Bit Keys. In a previous episode, I showed this old Tascam multi-track recorder that uses cassette tapes. Now, in this episode, I'm going to show a different type of multi-track recorder, although this did come out in 1999. So this is the Boss BR-8, and it was donated to me by Brett out of Northampton, Pennsylvania. So thank you very much, Brett. This thing has way more features than I would dare try to show in a 10 or 15 minute long episode. But there is one feature that I think you will find particularly interesting about it, and that is the media that it records to, which is iomega zip disks. In fact, it's the original 100 megabyte version of the zip drive. According to the manual, it has 3 quality settings: standard, live, and long. And those will give you 50, 60, or 75 minutes of recording time on a single zip disk. Now, it's important to realize as an 8-track recorder, this time is shared between all of the tracks. So if you were to record 2 tracks, then that number is halved, and so on. If you use all 8 tracks, then you would be getting around 6 minutes per track on the highest quality setting. Which isn't bad, really. It's probably not often that you would need to record a song more than 6 minutes long, especially with all 8 tracks. Now, what's fascinating to me is that if you look at a regular standard music CD, it holds 650 megabytes of uncompressed digital audio. And that's for 2 tracks because it is stereo at 44 kilohertz and 16 bits. And you're able to store 74 minutes of audio. So I'm thinking, okay, well, if we break it down to a single track, that's about 325 megabytes for 74 minutes of audio. So I'm quite curious how this machine puts that same amount of audio on a 100 megabyte zip disk. So my first thought is maybe they lowered the sampling rate or the bit depth or something like that in order to compensate. But I looked at the manual and found out it's 24 bits. So the only conclusion I can come to is that they must be using some kind of minimal audio compression, although I have not been able to figure out what kind it is. Okay, well, let me try this thing out. I'm going to attempt to record a song that I've been tinkering with on the keyboard for a while. That's a song that's going to be featured in the game I'm currently developing for the Commodore 64. So I actually don't really care too much what instruments I use because this is going to eventually get transcribed into a SID chip music. But I'll be using my Yamaha PSS 470. So the first thing I need to do is insert a blank zip disk. And it will ask me if I want to initialize it. So I will go ahead and do that. After initialization, it tells me I have 49 minutes and 49 seconds of record time. I guess that is close enough to the 50 minutes they said I would get. Believe it or not, this thing has its own drum machine built in. So I'm going to select a rhythm here to help keep me on beat. However, this drum track is never actually recorded to the audio, it's always generated on the fly. I'm going to change it to rock number 3. So before each time you record, you need to always hit this button to essentially rewind back to the beginning of the song. Then select the track you want to record, in this case 1 is already blinking, then hit record and then play. I always like to record my bass lines first, so that's what I'm doing here. When you're done, click stop. Then you can select track number 2 or whatever track you want. Then rewind, of course, and then we start all over again. Okay, so now I'm going to add track 3. And here is track 4. Okay, so when I'm done with the unit, I click the power off button and it asks me if I want to shut down. I click yes, then yes, I want to save. Then it ejects the zip disk and powers itself off. So naturally I was curious what would happen if I stuck this disk in my PC and tried to read it. Well, I only have one functioning zip drive right now and it's an old parallel port model. So I can use it on this old 486 laptop in Windows 95. So I put the disk in and sure enough it can read it. I thought it would be some foreign file system, but it's just a regular FAT32 file system of all things. I can't tell you what any of these files are, but you could make a copy of it for backup, I guess. However, it turns out that Boss actually provided a software utility you could run on a PC called the Wave Converter. I just need to select drive D, as that's my zip drive, and you can see the different tracks on the disk. I never renamed them from default, so they still say they're guitar and whatnot. But I can select one and tell it to convert the track to a WAV file. Now for all the good this does, since my 46 laptop has no sound card, so I can't even play it, but you get the idea. So this thing's actually pretty cool. I mean, back in 1999, you did have removable flash media, like compact flash cards, for example. But back then, the capacity was very small, and they were also very expensive. So the zip disk would have been a much more viable option for doing this kind of recording. And it's pretty neat because it did give consumers the ability to digitally work with their music and have a method to get the digital files over to their computer in a lossless format. Probably one of the few devices that could do that in 1999. And considering that hard drive capacity back then was typically just not a whole lot much bigger than a zip disk anyway, people would probably store their music projects on the zip disk. Whereas today we think of a flash media as a means of recording and then transferring something to something like a PC. But this would have not only been the recording medium, but I imagine this would have been the storage and archival format as well. I managed to find the original demo disc on eBay for a few bucks, so I thought we'd try that out and see how it sounds. It looks like there are 4 different songs on here. I'll just play the first one. It's more interesting to play with the volume sliders when it's somebody else's song. So I thought I would disassemble this thing. I'm really curious to see what's inside, especially which CPU it's using. Considering when it was made, I'm guessing it'll be a PowerPC of some kind. Well, it turns out all the good stuff is covered up by this metal shield. I went ahead and took the board out in case there was something on the other side, but turns out there isn't. Theoretically, I could desolder the shield, but I'm not willing to risk such a nice piece of equipment over just a curiosity. Well, I guess that about wraps it up for this episode. I think this is a pretty neat device. It would have been really awesome to have back in 1999, but it's really pretty usable even today. And even though they don't make zip disks anymore, I mean, you can still buy these. There's packs of them on eBay you can buy that are brand new in the box and never been used, and they're actually considerably cheaper today than they were back in 1999. So it's still a fairly viable way of recording music. Well, thanks for watching, and stick around because I do have more content coming.